Hello and welcome to this third webinar series organized by the ELIMED Foundation for European Foreign Policy, ELIAMEP-Medyascope, and the Center for Applied Turkish Studies, the CATS network, supported by Germany's Foreign Affairs Ministry and Stiftung Mercator. I am Dimitris Tsatras. I'm a senior research fellow at ELIMED, the ELIMED Foundation for European and Foreign Policy, and today I am delighted to be hosting this webinar on a very important event, and in particular on the role of women in Turkey's public life. Questions. I'm going to start with you, Nilgün, to ask you first of all, if you have, from your experience, observed any recent change in women's full and active participation in civic life, and how would you assess the situation at this moment?
As you mentioned in your introductory speech, dear Dimitri, you mentioned that the Turkish women's participation into civic life has never been perfect, although thanks to Atatürk, the women in Turkey were given the universal suffrage right back in 1934. However, starting from especially 2011, we observe a continuing deterioration trend in Turkey's women's rights or their participation in civic life. I don't want to bore you with statistical figures, but I would like to share with you some statistical figures to back up my argument. I checked the figures of the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report back in 2021. Among 156 countries, Turkey ranks 133rd in general regarding gender equality. This figure was 122nd back in 2011. The second criterion is political empowerment. Currently, Turkey ranks 114th behind Kazakhstan and Afghanistan, to my great surprise. This figure was 89th back in 2011. When we look at the economic participation and opportunity, in Turkey, as you mentioned as well, women's economic participation rate is 38%, 38.5%. There is 50% gap with men in Turkey. Among 156 countries, Turkey ranks 114th. And Turkey comes after Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Gambia, and this figure was 132nd back in 2011. And the final criterion I would refer to is educational attainment. Though Turkey is doing relatively well in this area, still it ranks 101st in 2021. It comes after Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. There hasn't been any change in this ranking since 2011. Why? Why there is a continuous deterioration in Turkish women's participation into civic life? When we question that, I think the main reason is the trend towards more authoritarianism in Turkey after the third consecutive electoral win of the governing party, Justice and Development Party. Starting from 2011 on, continuously the party in the government put the woman's status into the family. An academician called Alparslan Nars refers to this as familiarization of women. Even the ministry in the government dealing with women issues, even it changed its name. It was at the beginning the Ministry of Women and Family, and back in 2011 it was changed into the Ministry of Family and Social Policy. So the name of the woman was erased from the name of the ministry. then, while making this change, then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the current president of Turkey, said that our party is a conservative democratic party. The family is important to us. I remember at that time, Human Rights Watch evaluated this change in the name of the ministry as a big leap backwards for Turkey in terms of attaining gender equality. This trend has gone hand in hand with the limitation of the child care services in different ministries, in different institutions in Turkey. In the post-2011 period, when the governing party won 49 of votes, the emphasis was put on raising pious generations, refusal of abortion, insulting expressions on alcohol drinkers, and the rejection of non-familial lifestyles such as unmarried boy and girl living together. Since the mid-2000s, actually, the notion of the family has occasionally been portrayed by AKP as a family as an extended family where all the members are very happy and live in peace. And in this extended family, woman is given a central role. But in the central role being given to the woman, also the governing party legitimized the male hegemony. So more and more, under the Justice and Development Party rule, issues regarding women are mentioned insofar as they are within the context of family or with regard to the headscarf issues. According to the government party program back in 2011, women are important not because they constitute the half of the population, but because they play the primary role in raising next generations. So conceiving women merely in relation to family as mothers and wives, rather than free, independent individuals, conservatism has led to this devastating effects on the participation of women in Turkey into the civic life. And lastly, I would like to mention one thing: why the Justice and Development Party, the government of the country who was a candidate to EU, and then back in 2011, the negotiations were continuing. I remember previous to the 2011 elections, they chose to have a conservative, religious, and nationalist discourse, and resulted in this 49% of the votes. And I think since then, to pay tribute to the conservative religious base, and it's a very strong base, the governing party chose to limit the woman's role in the society to her role in the family as a mother, as a caretaker of the children, and as a housekeeper. I would stop here, then I can continue as well.
Yeah, more than the national statistical data, my preference will be to give some snapshots from the field, because I have been working in the field for a very long time. What I see is that, yes, like in the many parts of the world, there is feminization of poverty. It can be, the COVID-19 triggers. It was a really triggering factor. It is undeniable. And when you think about the absorption of the women labor force, mainly in the informal sector, they are the, bodies, they are the, segment who really impacted very, very heavily from COVID-19 pandemic process. And if there is a sacrifice of one breadwinner from the household, in general, it is the sacrificing side is the women, because of the fact that there is a general acceptance that their care responsibility is very important for the family. And right now we are on the eve of this post-pandemic process, and as I said, we are very closely working with the cooperatives, women cooperatives. There is a very strong desire of the women to have a life in dignity by their own effort. And it is a very huge, how can I say that, a very big diversity in the women cooperatives. You can say that in the past, I remember when people define the women cooperatives, the reference is mainly the women above 40 or 45, illiterate or with limited literacy. No, but we don't have such a composition. We have a composition of a huge array of women representing all segments. Yes, we have the medium-age women, we have the illiterate women, but we have the women who has their professional career, but who want to express themselves in the solidarity economy. And yes, right now the country is in the midst of a very serious economic stagnation and recession, and the events of the global level events also triggers some of the negative developments. And only last week, we had 2 provincial meetings with more than 200 women cooperatives. They are optimistic about the future. They are all well aware of the challenges because of the fragility of the economy, because of their not very strong basis as the institutional bodies, but at the end of the day, they are ready to change their life for not only for themselves, for a better life, but also for the lives of the next generation. This next generation is not necessarily their children. It can be the young generation of the countries, and there is a very interesting and very I really listen in admiration endeavor of the women cooperatives to invite and to absorb the needs. As you know, the proportion of the percentage of the needs is very, very high in the country, above the OECD percentage. And they try to, in a sense, invite and absorb them in the women cooperatives. Because they believe in the value of their creative minds, these young generations, the young women, the young men, and they also believe that together with such different groups, they will have more prospects for the future. With regards to the analysis that Nilgün Hanım points out, as I said, I am not in a position to make assessment at the national level. What I know is the local dynamics. Some parts are really suffering because of their limited, access to resources, because of maybe the traditional roles that the community define for the women. But when I go to the other parts, it is more or less changing. What I witness is that, yes, there is a positive development with regards to the perception of the women participation in employment, in economy, in labor markets, but there is a long way ahead, and I believe that at the end of the day, only the resilient one will have better chances compared to the ones who are in the process for the sake of participating.
There's a wonderful new paper by some Turkish scholars, Tunali, Kedar, and Danglu, in World Development. It came out last year. And they show that when Turkey underwent economic growth in the 2000s, there was a rise in female employment in cities. So although Turkish women's employment is relatively low, when there is economic growth, especially if it's labor intensive, then female employment comes up. So what's really important is that, across the world, employers tend to prefer men. They see them as more reliable, more productive. They don't have children. And so, but in Turkey, as in the rest of the world, when there's rampant business growth, when businesses expand, when businesses do well, they need more and more workers, so they hire women. So it's periods of economic growth, especially when it's labor intensive, that have seen rise in female employment. And female employment is not the ultimate goal, but it's a stepping stone for women forging friendships, coming out into the public sphere, mixing, sharing ideas, emboldening each other, learning about movements, learning about activism. So I just wanted to emphasize the importance of jobs and growth. And of course, it's not only COVID which has caused the downturn, but the general jobs climate in Turkey more generally, right? So anything that's going to depress economic growth in Turkey is going to make it even harder for women to find work. And on top of that, Turkish women face maybe several additional struggles. Number one, because female employment is low generally, because maybe families are concerned that they don't want their daughters or wives to work if it's improper, if it's not respectable, if it's for strangers, they don't know who they're mixing with. Female employment tends to stay low, even among women without children, even among working class women. So because fewer women are putting themselves out there into the labor force, that means that it's even more expensive to hire care. So even women who are university graduates who desperately want to work, they will struggle to afford someone who they can pay to look after their kids while they're away at work. So it's the general problem of low female employment means you don't have many women who want to be nannies or carers who help out with the kids, which means that care is even more expensive, which means it's even harder for middle and upper class women to seize those labor market opportunities. So I would say specific for Turkey, there are those sort of interacting issues. The question of joblessness and unemployment, the high cost of care, which is itself partly a function of low government investment. So in Turkey, government investment in public childcare is much lower than places like Greece or Italy, much, much lower. And then in addition to that, families have a particular concern with women joining the public sphere. So families might be very, very receptive to women getting a job in the government because that's respectable, perfectly fine. But, more concerned about them for example, maybe you're in Konya, you've got a family business of trading pistachios. A family might be much more reluctant about a young daughter going and trading and meeting people. So I think there are a number of issues.
Let me start by explaining what Istanbul Convention means shortly. Istanbul Convention is the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. This is the long version of the name of Istanbul Convention. Its main aim are protect women against all forms of violence, and prevent, prosecute, and eliminate violence against women and domestic violence. The most important part of the Istanbul Convention, I think, it designs a comprehensive framework, policies, and measures for the protection of all victims of violence, not only women, but all victims of violence. It also envisages promotion of international cooperation in this area, and it also envisages support and assistance to organizations and law enforcement agencies working in the area of preventing violence against women. Turkey actually was one of the first signatories of this convention back in 2011, and then Turkey ratified it in 2012. Actually, leading academicians in Turkey, Professor Feride Acar, a sociologist and a political scientist, she's one of the authors of the Istanbul Convention, and the convention was signed in Istanbul, as you could understand from the name. Then, although the deterioration was about to begin regarding the women's participation in civic life, the foreign policy of the governing party was a bit different. First, there was a functioning pre-accession process of the government. Turkey was not a virtual but real candidate country for the accession to the EU. And if you would remember that the year 2011 was the year of the so-called Arab Spring, or transformation in the Arab world, let me say, Turkey regarded itself, and also Europe regarded Turkey as an example, as a model, as a source of inspiration for the countries in Middle East, as it represents itself as a combination of religion, Islam, I mean, secularism and democracy. I remember back in, if I'm not wrong, July 2011, the then Prime Minister Erdogan made a very famous speech in Egypt, emphasizing that combining secularism and democracy is crucial. As if that's a proof, so the signature of Istanbul Convention was a kind of proof of this argument of Turkey being a model to these countries. And also referring to what Ali said, there was the 2011, it was the year of economic growth for Turkey. And also one of the constituents of Turkey's soft power on the countries in its region, in its neighborhood, let me say, was giving emphasis to women's rights. So Istanbul Convention was signed back in 2011, and after a decade, Turkey withdrew from the convention with a presidential decree. Although the convention was ratified by the parliament back in 2012, we withdrew from the convention with a presidential decree. Of course, I mean, this was met by criticisms. First of all, in Turkey, women's rights activists, lawyers, and opposition politicians denounced this decree, insisting that Turkey cannot be legally taken out of an international convention ratified by parliament.
Dimitri, the point is, it is still, as Nilgün Hanım also elaborated, a very unknown process, with lots of dynamics. But I try to read the process not only from the decree viewpoint, but the dynamics, some other dynamics in the society. As Nilgün Hanım points out, the women movement in Turkey is very strong and very, dedicated to their cause, regardless of the difficulties that they face. Yes, of course, there are very strong, signs that after the withdrawal, the indications, the events of domestic violence tend to increase. But as I said, I am a person working in the field. What the women complain about is that their, very limited economic power is also one of the sources that really, intensifies or increases the number of domestic violence. COVID-19, again, from the field, we have conducted lots of studies. What we observed in that period is that the domestic violence, not only against women, but also children, was skyrocketed at that time. And in the midst of this very heavy, economic, maybe you can say depression or stagnation, again, it seems that the victims of the violence is, again, mainly the women and children. About the process, to be frank, I don't have, I followed, as Nilgün Hanım points out, the decision of the conclusion of the prosecutor. My prediction is that there can be, maybe again some, moves to readapt. It can be very optimistic, maybe, to conclude to readaptation, but there is also an effort, in brackets, a Turkish version of the Istanbul Convention will be worked on, because as again I refer to Nilgün Hanım, one of the criticism, the strongest criticism against the convention is that it favors, again in brackets, homosexuality, and it challenges the sexual health of the young generation. So let's see what will happen. But my prediction is that there will be an effort for maybe a soft, again, I use this very deliberate, carefully in brackets, a soft version of the convention, as the politician called the Turkish version of the Istanbul Convention. I am also, how can I say that, observing the process very closely from women movement perspective, from the victims of the domestic violence. But what I can say is that, of course, importance of such a framework is very, very important. And we need to also, read the recent, increasing cases of domestic violence, again through this, economic shortages, financial problems of the families, which is very, which is unbearable in their own statement to survive in peace in their household.
So let's suppose you're a family in Konya and the only available job is really maybe working in a bakery with a couple of guys behind closed doors, and the pay is terrible. You wouldn't want to do it because people will start talking what's going on in that bakery, who is she hanging out with, what's the story there, and the pay is so tiny, so it's not worth it. Whereas only when there's economic boom and there are so many jobs opportunities that the wages are much higher, the family's like, yeah, it makes sense for her to go and get a job. It makes sense for her to work for the government because it's totally respectable. The pay is great. It's worth it. And also, if there is economic boom, then everyone's daughter and sister and wife is working. So it's hardly bad to be, it's hardly, no one's questioning you in particular to be the only woman working. So it says the honor income trade-off. So the honor income trade-off depends on the local labor demand and also the cultural preference for honor. So in Spain and Greece and Italy, say, there is a lower concern about honor as compared to Konya or southeastern Turkey, where it's often much a greater concern for honor, right? So the wages have to be high enough to compensate for the loss of honor.
Thank you ever so much for your participation and your great.
Thank you so much for inviting us. It's a great, brainstorming for me also. Thank you so much.
I agree with Leyla. Yes, thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much for being here. Have a great day.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.